Hello, thank you for joining me for today's Earth Live lesson. My name's Jack Ashby. I'm a zoologist and author working at the University Museum of Zoology in Cambridge. I'm here to talk to you about some of my very favourite animal adaptations that I've come across in my work. And my life flips between two different places, the Museum of Zoology in Cambridge, where we work to excite people about the natural world and also to better understand how the animal kingdom, how animal life works from our museum specimens. And secondly, from my trips to Australia, where I undertake field work on behalf of conservation organisations and universities out there, particularly on the ecology of Australian mammals like Tasmanian devils and small marsupial carnivores and Australia's native rodents. And these two parts of my life reflect what I think are the two key pillars of natural history: understanding from the living and the dead. So what we learn from museum objects, the dead animals, is very, very different to what we learn from live animals out in the field. In the field, we meet them on their own terms. It might be very, very brief moments of encounter, watching them go about their lives, understanding how their adaptations actually play out in the real world. Whereas in museums, obviously we can take our time, we can look under the animal's skin, and it's a very, very different kind of question that we're asking. We're asking how they're built to do what they do, how they're evolved, how they've related to other animals. And we can't get the whole picture of an animal without both of those things, looking at dead animals and looking at live animals. So to explain what I mean, I'm going to start by talking about my favorite animal in the world, which I think is a scientific fact. I mean, scientifically speaking, the platypus is the best animal in the world. When they were first described by European scientists at the end of the 1700s, they described them as the most remarkable, extraordinary animals ever. And I think they're right. It's taken over 200 years, but from studying both preserved platypuses in museums and from observing live animals, we've managed to unpick the puzzles of the platypus. I'm going to go through what some of those amazing adaptations are from, as I say, the best animal in the world. To start with, their bills. They're sometimes called duck-billed platypuses because their bills are said to look a lot like ducks. They do on the outside look a lot like ducks, but actually they're, unlike a duck, very soft and leathery. Now, platypuses do with their bills is they detect electricity. They are one of the only mammals known to detect electricity. And as you may know, every muscle contraction, every movement in the animal kingdom is controlled by electrical impulses firing through your nerves. Now, platypuses eat crustaceans and small insect larvae and worms that live under the sediment at the bottom of lakes and rivers in Australia. And when they're swimming, they close up their eyes and their ears, which are in a little furrow on their head, so they can't see and they can't hear. They use their bills to detect the electrical impulses of the movements of their food, so these crustaceans and insect larvae and worms, right down to their heartbeats. So they can sense the world in other animals' electrical impulses and hone in exactly where they come from with those bills. And inside their bills, there are ridges, horny ridges. Platypuses don't have teeth. They have horny ridges. These sometimes obviously crustaceans are very hard bodied, so they're mushing up these animals. They can store them in cheek pouches until they get to the surface where they chew them up. But having horny ridges instead of teeth means that their teeth don't get worn down. They can keep regrowing this horny plates in a way that you can't regrow teeth. Electro-detecting mammals, one of the only ones. Secondly, along with their relatives, the echidnas, spiny anteaters, platypuses and echidnas are the only mammals that lay eggs. Now, to understand why that is, platypus and echidnas, like all mammals evolved from reptile-like ancestors that lived about 300 million years ago. We call them pelycosaurs. All mammals evolved from these reptile-like ancestors. And platypuses and echidnas have retained some of the characteristics that we see in these ancient animals. for example, laying eggs. As you probably know, most reptiles lay eggs. Platypus and echidnas still lay eggs. They also walk with bent elbows and knees, so they hold their legs and arms out sideways from their body, which is much more like a lizard than it is like another mammal. You see, humans and most other mammals hold their legs directly below their body. So these are kind of reptilian, reptile-like characteristics that platypuses and echidnas have. But on top of that, don't forget, they've got these most amazing adaptations like detecting electricity. Something else that's unusual about both platypuses and echidnas is that they don't have nipples, but they do produce milk, because the defining characteristic of being a mammal is producing milk. They don't have nipples, they just ooze the milk out onto their skin. They kind of then gets wicked up by the fur, the babies suck it up from the fur. And that's really interesting because in most mammals which do have nipples, the milk obviously goes straight from the mother into the baby's mouth. Now, because platypuses don't do that, they need to find a way of sterilizing the milk. So their platypus milk has antibacterial properties to help to stop the babies getting infection from the mother's fur. And this could have really, really important medical benefits for humans, for example, to use the antibacterial properties of platypus milk potentially to fight hospital superbugs, which I think is pretty amazing. Their feet are incredible. I think not only the best animal in the world, but the best feet in the animal kingdom. In this picture, their feet are unfurled. They have webbing on their skin, on their feet, that extends beyond their fingers. And when they're swimming, they can unfurl these big webs to work as paddles to make them very, very efficient swimmers. On land, they ball up those webs and they walk on their knuckles so that they're not damaging the webbing. And even better than that, it's like a Swiss Army knife, their feet. When they're burrowing, they fold back the webbing behind their nails, and they've got really, really tough, long nails, really, really strong arm skeletons to help them burrow up to 30 meters. A female platypus can burrow up to 30 meters to protect their young. It's all with one set of feet. And finally, on the platypus, perhaps the most amazing thing is that they are one of the only venomous mammals. So platypus males have a spur on their ankles, just behind their foot. It's a horny spur, it's about 2 centimeters long. And during the breeding season, it produces a very potent venom. So not only are they one of the only venomous mammals, but they are also the only seasonally venomous animal, the only animal that produces venom only certain parts of the year. And the male platypuses use that mainly to fight between other platypuses, other males. So they will stab another male with their ankles, jamming it in between their two legs. And while that male is stunned, go off and mate with the females. Now, if a human gets stung by a platypus, it is said to be extraordinarily painful, one of the most painful things that could happen to you. And it can last, the effects from platypus venom can last for years afterwards. People have lost complete muscular control of the body parts that have been stung by a platypus. So absolutely incredible animals. The platypuses and echidnas are called monotremes. They're Australian and New Guinean mammals that lay eggs, and the monotremes. My other favourite animals are the marsupials of Australia. And I think the very best marsupial is the wombat. This is a wombat. It's about life size. This is a toy wombat. It's about life size. And I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time with wombats in Tasmania on fieldwork and with platypuses, which allows me to understand how the adaptations that I can see in the museum specimens in Cambridge play out and are used by platypuses in their real lives. And to start with, they have incredibly strong arms. Like platypuses, wombats can dig extremely long and very large burrows in really, really hard soil. They live in various parts of Australia where you get kind of concrete-like soil, and they have lumps and bumps all over their bones, really strong muscles. Whenever you see a bump on a bone, it's for a muscle attachment. And wombat limbs are covered in these bumps to allow really, really strong digging muscles. Their hands, their feet, are also really, really robust with long claws for digging. They look kind of like a badger's paws. Badgers also burrow, but unlike a badger, wombats can actually grip with their hands. They can grab onto grass and hold it whilst they are biting with their teeth, which is amazing. And that's because wombats, like most other marsupials, have to climb into the pouch from when they are born, so they end up with very, very grasping hands, even when their feet actually look like a flat-footed animal. You can see that their heads are massive, so they have battering ram heads. Their skulls are solidly sutured. When you look at a museum specimen, they're really, really tough. And that's because wombats use their heads as battering rams to get objects out of the way, and also to get other wombats out of the way, and also sometimes people and predators. So they just run up to something and whack it out of the way with their head. And at the other end of their body, their bottoms are a lot bigger than this toy wombat. Their bottoms actually extend quite far over their back legs. And what they do, it is thought, with these really, really large fat behinds, is if a predator chases them into a burrow, they can use their backsides to crush the predator's skull against the roof of the burrow. This is maybe dogs or dingoes or foxes have been found with crushed skulls that we think have been crushed by wombat bottoms. And finally, at the front end of a wombat, their teeth are absolutely unique among marsupials. Wombats are the only marsupials that have constantly growing teeth. Now, a lot of the plants in Australia are really, really tough. They might have grains of glass in them. They might have a lot of grasses have glass in them. They might just be really, really tough, and that wears down an animal's teeth. Now, wombats can constantly regrow from the gum end all of their teeth throughout their lives. They're being worn down by the plants at the front end and regrowing at the back end. And that also allows them to burrow with their teeth, to chew through tougher parts of soil with their teeth. But a question coming in is, how many people have been stung by a male platypus? We don't know. Obviously, Australian Aboriginal people have lived in Australia for about 50,000 years. So there's no long-term records of how many people have been stung. In European times in Australia, it's not that many. There is quite a small handful of accounts of people being stung by platypuses. Fortunately, because there is no antivenom. So back on the theme of marsupials' teeth. Now, I don't know about you, but whenever I go to the dentist and something isn't going particularly well with my teeth, I am quite conscious of the fact that the human teeth are quite flawed. We only have two sets of teeth. We have baby teeth and we have adult teeth. And if we do any damage to our adult teeth, they don't get replaced. Now, that's true of most animals. Most mammals, should I say, only have one set of teeth in their adult stages. Sharks, as you may know, have thousands of teeth for their lifetimes. This is a few million-year-old fossil shark teeth. Now, sharks are constantly dropping. This is the tooth. This is the pointy bit. Constantly dropping their teeth as they get worn down. Now, mammals don't tend to do that. I don't really know why. It would be very handy to be able to replace their teeth. But kangaroos have done something almost as good. So this is a kangaroo skull. When we look in museum specimens of kangaroos of the same species, we can get a bit confused because they have different numbers of teeth in them. That's because kangaroos change the number of teeth throughout their lifetimes. They only have a baby set and an adult set, just like us, but they only erupt their adult set in waves over the course of their lifetime. So they might start off with 2 of their cheek teeth, and over time they move in waves horizontally down their jaws. In the end, only having 4 maximum number of molars. So they might start off with 2. At one point, they'll end up with 4. You can see this one actually has 3 fully grown molars, and there's one just at the back that is starting to push those other teeth forward. By the end of their lives, they'd only have 1 or 2. There's actually one species of hopping marsupial, rock quality, called a narbalek, which has an unlimited number of teeth. It's the only mammal known to have an unlimited number of teeth. We do see this elsewhere. We do see horizontal teeth replacement like a kangaroo elsewhere in the animal kingdom. This is a mammoth tooth found not far from where I live in Hertfordshire near London. It's about 50,000-year-old mammoth tooth. Mammoths and other elephants have 1 tooth in each side of their jaw at any one time in their life. And that, like a kangaroo, they get replaced. They get worn down by the tough woody plants that they eat. This is the cutting surface. Those huge teeth, they still get worn down. So elephants move their teeth along the along their jaw, and another tooth comes in behind it. Now they can do that 6 times. And if an elephant or a mammoth wears down its 6 set of teeth, then it will die of old age. Now the question is, what is a kangaroo's typical diet? So different species of kangaroo, different things, but they're all herbivores. So some of them graze, so that means they eat grass, and some of them browse, which means they eat leaves on bushes and other shrubby plants. And we have another question, which is how many species of marsupial are there on the planet? There's about 300 species of marsupial, about 100 of them live in the Americas, and about 200 of them live in Australia, New Guinea, and surrounding countries. I'm going to move on to my favorite skull in the animal kingdom that is not a marsupial. In fact, it lives completely opposite to a marsupial. It's a walrus. So walruses live around the Arctic, and they have incredible teeth, starting with those massive canines. So a male walrus might have 1 meter long canines. That's these teeth, the sharp teeth in your jaws, that that grow out the front of their faces. They're being used to haul. They can use them to walk their bodies outside of the ice. So they can they use them like ice axes to stick their teeth into the ice and then pull their bodies up onto the ice. Their scientific name is Odobenus, which means tooth walker. So they can, as I say, use them like ice anchors to pull them out of pull themselves out of the water. They can also use them to cut holes in the ice. They can use them to fight over territory on the ice. And they can use them, my favorite, as ice anchors. So they can hook them into the ice, with their bodies in the water, and with their teeth hooked into the ice, and they can fall asleep in the water without drowning. But most impressively, I think, is what's going on inside a walrus's skull. Now, despite their size, they can grow over 3 even 4 meters long. They mostly eat tiny clams, a bit like this sort of size clam that they find on the bottom of the sea. What they do is they don't chew these clams. If you look inside a walrus's stomach, there are no shells. There is only meat. If you look at their cheek teeth, they have a few cheek teeth, molars at the back. They're not scratched, or they haven't been chewing these clams. But instead, what they do, you might be able to see, there's a little ridge, little nook at the front of the walrus's jaws. It's absolutely solidly fitted together, and they will put the clam into that little knot at the front of their jaw, and they can pick up the clams using their whiskers. Their whiskers are really, really muscularly controlled. They pick them up and sit them in there, and then their jaws are arched, so their palate is arched, the roof of their mouth is like a tube, and their tongue is also like a tube. And what they do is, with the muscle held at the front of their mouth and their tongue stuck against the clam, they will pull their tongue suddenly through the arch of their mouth, which is like a piston, which shucks the meat out of the clam shell without ever putting the shell in their mouth. That pulls the meat out, and then they can swallow the meat without getting all that scratching and tough to digest clam shells in. Absolutely incredible. I think very quickly I've got time for one more skull or head, and that is of a venomous snake. This is a puff adder. And you may be able to see that. Well, firstly, I'm going to ask you if you can all try and move your head in as many ways as you can without moving your neck. So we can't do that very much. The only part of our head we can move is our jaw, and we can't move that very much. We can only move it maybe 5 millimeters to the left and right, maybe 5 millimeters forward and back, and a couple of centimeters up and down. The snakes can actually rotate their skulls around a point, not only at the jaw joint, but also at 6 or 7 other points across their skull, which means their skulls are incredibly flexible. And unlike the walrus, which is completely fused at the chin of a snake isn't joined together at all. The 2 bones on either side aren't joined together at all. They can fold out their skulls into a massive circle around whatever they're trying to eat. They can eat things that are larger than their body. But most impressively, these 2 rows of teeth, not the same as our teeth. They are on the roof of the mouth, And those two rows of teeth can be moved independently. So they can move one side forward, hook it into their food, and walk it back. And then the other side forward, move it forward, hook it in, and walk it back. So that they are walking their heads over their body, over the food as they go down. This is another one of those stories that can only be seen on from looking at both the skull in the museum and the specimen in the museum, and actually what the the live snakes are doing in real life. And that's really the message of today's Earth Live lesson, is to work out what an animal is doing. You need to look at both of its live living behavior, and also have a look under the skin in museums. So next time you're out and you see an animal doing something, think about what it needs inside its body to allow it to make movements like it's doing, and to have those kind of behaviors. And equally, when you're in a museum, or if you come across a skull or even a shell or an insect, look at all the lumps and bumps in it and think, what is each of those lumps and bumps doing? So I'm going to end there. My name is Jack Ashby. You can find me on Twitter with lots of museum and marsupial stories at Jack D. Ashby. Thank you for coming along today. Do come back tomorrow for another Earth Live lesson.